Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness. And Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we have a special guest, Tim Kellis, who is a renowned Wall Street analyst. He takes on what could be considered society's biggest problem today, divorce. He has solved the marriage issue, so we're looking forward to having this conversation and learning from him. So please welcome Tim. Thank you for joining us.
Well, first of all, thank you, Dr. Alice and Donovan, for giving me the opportunity to come on your show. This is going to be fun. I really appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come on and chat with you guys.
Awesome. Well, we're excited for this conversation. And why don't we just get started? And you can tell us a little about what led you to discover the secret, or what led you to, be an advocate for marriage and having it endure through the difficult times.
Beautiful question. So let me, first of all, I'm not a psychologist. I do not have a psychology background. Mm-hmm. Okay. First of all, I was raised in St. Louis, and my dad was a cab driver. So I was raised poor. And when I was 12 years old, I told my mom I wanted to be a Catholic priest when I was 12 years old, and then I discovered girls. So that whole career path kind of got derailed, but more significantly, I did well in school. So I have an engineering degree. I went back and spent 9 years in the telecom equipment industry. After graduating my engineering degree, I went back and got my MBA. And I landed on Wall Street as the first semiconductor analyst on Wall Street to focus on the communications market. So in other words, I'm a nerd. I have a very analytical background. And at the height of all this, it was actually a girl that I had known for 8 years. We were in the same circle of friends in Dallas. I lived in Dallas for 10 years. It was one of my stops on my journey. And but she always had a boyfriend. I always had a girlfriend. But we got together when we weren't dating anybody else, and we fell in love. And as anybody who's ever fallen in love knows, it happened very quickly. It's just a matter of time before we knew it. We've known each other for a long time, but we never got together romantically. And when we did, it happened very quickly. So we were going to spend the rest of our lives together. And then we started fighting. And more importantly, when we went to the therapist, and the therapist wasn't helping. In fact, it was such a painful experience for me, and anybody who's broken up knows what I'm talking about. They're always very painful. I guess I just took it very seriously, and it was this woman that I spent my whole life looking for, and realized that relationship was going to. In fact, in the psychology world, it's referred to as a double bind. A double bind is when you turn right and you run into a wall, and when you turn left, you run into a wall, and that was where I was at. And my only outlet was, with my background, I was going to take on this project. So I spent nearly 2 years researching and writing this book. 100 books went into the research of my book. I read 2.5 books a week, nonstop for 10 months, and then moved to Costa Rica, dyed my hair blonde, pierced my ear, and wrote the book. It took me 9 months to write it. I lived in Costa Rica when I wrote the book. So this has been my journey of finally delivering a message to the public that will actually teach couples how to create lifelong marriages. This is extremely profound.
Yeah, that's a really nicely packaged sort of story, right? Like, makes sense how you sort of got to where you were. Following up on that, I would love to start digging into some of sort of the details and whatnot. The first question that I had actually, though, before we get too far into that is, you mentioned sort of you tried therapy and it wasn't working. And in fact, maybe it was making things worse. I'd be curious a little bit about that experience.
Well, and just so you know, Donovan, we could talk about this one subject for hours, just so you know, because just to let you guys in on what I just described to you, what a Wall Street analyst does. A Wall Street analyst, in essence, studies industries. I could literally spend the next 2 hours telling you how your phone works. So when I took on this project of researching the whole marriage issue, obviously psychology is an extremely important part of that. And the bottom line, Donovan, is the only reason why I could say I have solved the marriage problem is because I forgave my parents when I was 25 years old. One of my biggest messages and one of the biggest things I realized is the biggest influence on marriage is the relationship with the parents, because that's where you first learn about love. And I had gone through that, and I had figured this is what therapy is. Therapy is supposed to be about forgiving your parents. Okay. And that therapist, I actually have a transcript of the last therapy session with this guy where he asked me six times, how does it make you feel? It's called cognitive behavioral therapy. It's the how does it make you feel question, which doesn't do anything other than make you feel good about bitching about your partner. Doesn't solve any problems, but it's the foundation of therapy today. And it's the reason why traditional therapy doesn't work, because they don't address the root causes of problems. They just deal with the here and now. And that's one of the things that I discovered. One of the things that I realized, just to kind of summarize my message, is one of the things I realized is and I can discuss in detail where I come up with this number. Everybody's always asking me to validate this. But in my research, one of the conclusions I have from my research is that 80% of couples who seek help from professional licensed therapists end up getting divorced. I saw a therapist business card once that said she was a marriage and divorce therapist. It's better for the psychology industry for couples to get divorced because it means they make more money. So the interest on the psychology industry is why they get behavioral advice. Donovan, the bottom line is it's the how does it make you feel question. And what the psychology industry does today, it's the biology theory, by the way, which states that we're animals incapable of thinking. That's the foundation of the industry today. And that's why they give behavioral advice. They're treating you like a pet. So 5 love languages, for example, that's behavioral advice. That's what you get from the industry, and it doesn't work.
On that same sort of note, I'd be curious, because you said you've spent a lot of time thinking about this, right? I would imagine there are some cases where divorce is the answer. And it sounds like many more cases than people are typically seeing where it's not necessarily the answer. So I'd be curious to dig in on that piece a little more and just see sort of how you think about that sort of distinction.
I get asked that question all of the time. And my answer is always the same. If you were in love at the beginning, then you should be together. Well, what happens, Dr. Alice, is couples fall in love. They call it the romantic phase, but then they don't know how to relate to each other. What I'm doing basically is I'm teaching couples how to like each other. The loving part comes at the beginning. They just don't know how to relate to each other. They just don't know how to come together and become a partnership. And that's what I'm in essence doing, is I'm teaching couples how to become a partnership. But if you were in love at the beginning, you have fallen out of love, and that's why the relationship is ending. But you can stop that, because I can explain to you why you have fallen out of love and what to do about it. But if you were in love at the beginning, yes, you should still be together.
Yeah, I can understand that how we related to our parents and our relationship with our parents absolutely impacts how we are in our own marriages or relationships. Absolutely. I'm curious, like, how do you close that gap? Like, people start out in love, and obviously the divorce rate is pretty high. They fall out of love. What do you think that missing link is to have them stay in love, essentially?
There is one and only one character trait of relationships that's present in almost every relationship that ends. Only one. And number 2 doesn't even come close to even becoming in the ballpark from number 1. The one issue that destroys relationships is control. If you eliminate control in your marriage lasts for life. One of the biggest things I do is I neutralize the power drive. The answer is equality. That's the answer. That's the solution we've been looking for. And just so you know, equality means freedom. When you have a marriage based on equality, you both have freedom to develop into who both of you are supposed to be. Okay, and because the choice is one or the other. You either have freedom or prison, mental prison, which is the worst kind of prison you can have with the person that you love. So you can either be free in your marriage. In fact, one of the things I realize is the person controlling is also in prison. The person being controlled, obviously, but the person doing the controlling is also in prison. In fact, let me elaborate on that, because that's actually one of the coolest things that I've realized. It's actually a quote from a song by Eddie Vedder. Eddie Vedder is the lead singer of Pearl Jam. Yeah. And the name of the song is called Hard Sun, S-U-N. Once I built an ivory tower so I could worship from above, but when I climbed down to be set free, she let me in again. And what he's saying in that one verse is that he was building himself to be better than his wife, and he was imprisoning himself. And when he finally climbed down from that perch and looked at his wife eye to eye, I call it the king and queen concept. When the husband can look at his wife as the queen, and when the wife can look at her husband as the king, that's when you've got equality. But if not, when one thinks they're better than the other, they are also in prison. That's what the point. And just so you guys know, what we're doing here that's new, nobody in this industry has ever addressed marriages mentally or psychologically before. That is what I'm introducing to the marketplace, to give you a business phrase. So what we're having are mental conversations. I am the founder of one of the largest marriage groups on Facebook. Let me give you the best example. I'm the founder of one of the largest marriage groups on Facebook. The name of the group is called The Marriage Support Group. And I actually did not save this comment because it is what led to me starting to save all these conversations with people that just, let's say, aren't so insightful. But I have an interview, it's a 6-minute interview where I discuss the solution, equality, men are more logical, women are more emotional. That's one of the messages, one of the biggest things that I elaborate on. And there was a licensed therapist. This guy has a license in psychology. And he watches my video and he comments on the video because you said in there that women are more emotional. I don't know what that means. This is what this guy literally, he actually wrote that in the comment. He goes, I don't know what it means that women are emotional. And what he's saying in that comment is he has not been trained as a psychologist, psychology. That's what he's saying. If you want me, can I elaborate a little bit more?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Do either of you know who Carl Jung is?
Yes, very famous psychologist.
Exactly. Donovan, do you know who Carl Jung is?
Yep, I'm familiar with him, not intimately with his work, but I know who he is.
Okay. Carl Jung was 19 years younger than Freud. Freud looked up to Jung so much that he considered him not only his heir apparent, his replacement, but also his son. That's how close of a working relationship that they had. And as we all know, Freud's basic theory is that sex is what motivates us. It's not true, but it's still the foundation of the industry today. That's where, just so you know, that's where the biology theory comes from. It's sex is a biological thing. Making love, by the way, is the way it's supposed to be explained, but that's a mental thing, and that's not what the industry teaches because of Freud. But let me just say that Jung disagreed with Freud. And Jung is the one that figured this out. Freud didn't. Freud never even attempted to try and understand things from a mental perspective. He just said it was sex. Jung referred to it as the monotony of interpretation. And Jung and Freud had their famous breakup in 1912. And Jung is the one that figured out how the mind works. But the point is when Freud died in 1939, Jung still praised him. And what he said was that Freud's work was epic making. Because what Freud's work did was he introduced psychology into psychiatry. One of the things you realize when you study the psychology industry is that Freud and Jung were at the very beginning. Before Freud and Jung, it was only sticking ice pick in an eye socket to do a frontal lobotomy because we know the frontal cortexes were thinking. That's what they used to do it, Dr. Alice. You know that. We all know about what a frontal lobotomy is. And that's how they used to stick an ice pick in the eye socket. That's how they got access to the brain. And they would do a frontal lobotomy. And what Jung is saying with that praise is that Freud introduced, let's figure this out. But what Freud did was Freud introduced biology into psychology. He did not introduce psychology into psychology. Consequently, conventional science has long held the belief that the mind is an illusion, a side effect of the electrochemical activities of the brain. Whenever you hear a professional mention the brain, serotonin, dopamine, neuron synapse, chemical imbalance, bipolar, anything that has to do with the brain, what they're saying is that you're an animal. That's why they label you. Okay, so they're not addressing things mentally. So yeah, just long story down, and that's the point is what this is we're addressing marriages mentally and psychologically because when you do it that way, it works. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think that gives a good explanation, sort of a basis for some of the ideas that you've like started expanding on a little bit. On a related note, I would like to take the conversation to sort of, okay, so equality is one of these big, or maybe the only, but the main driver that we need. So let's make a hypothetical situation that I come to you, right? There's some friction in my relationship. Where is a good place to sort of start thinking about how to build equality or change sort of whatever dynamic exists if, you know, the equality piece is not working out from the beginning? Because I imagine a lot of people are coming not at that point and need to transition.
Mm.
And because you've asked a very, very deep question, because the answer, you're gonna laugh at first until I explain myself, but the answer to your question is when you argue. Because what you're doing when you're arguing is you're revealing your triggers.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I elaborate on, I call it the hierarchy of the argument. There's a process that we go through mentally that leads to an argument. And that process begins with an insecurity. And I always use this as an example because most of us can relate to this, but say your parents got divorced. So now you're afraid of marriage because the role models that you grew up with, remember, the younger you are, the bigger the influences are, okay? And your parents are the biggest. And if they got divorced, and not only that, you learn this as a child, where you're not as cognitively skilled to be able to deal with it. So you're in more of an emotional state than a cognitive state or a logical state as a youngster. And so you take this experience and you put it, the unconscious is an attic. It's like a hard drive with your computer. And so you store that as a file, and that file is used later whenever something triggers it. That's what, in essence, triggering means. So that insecurity then leads to a prejudice. And just so you know, this is the first place that you've ever heard this, because this is one of the things that I've discovered. And you can Google it. Go to Google and say, "Our mental troubles are prejudices," and put quotes around it, and you will get a 0 return. One of the things that I've discovered is our mental problems are prejudices. So now I have a prejudice about marriage because my parents got divorced. That's the trigger event that triggers the insecurity, is the prejudice. So if I fall in love with a girl, that's going to draw my parents' divorce into this insecurity. The prejudice is what triggers it, because I'm prejudiced against this girl now because my parents got divorced. And that's what leads to being judgmental, which leads to me being angry. And the reason why I go through this, and obviously I elaborate on a lot more detail, but what I'm doing is I'm connecting the dots between anger and fear. Okay, so when one person gets angry, that's because they're afraid. And when you understand that you're supposed to be focused on the fear, not the anger, here, let me elaborate where I'm going with this as well. If you think about, Donovan, when you first meet a girl, what you're doing. Think about your first date with a girl. What are you doing? You're doing what I call character research, right? Where are you from? I grew up here. I went to school here. I've got siblings. I played the sports. You're doing character research. Okay. Couples fall in love with each other's character, and they fall out of love with each other's behavior. And let me explain that. Okay. So I'm working with this couple. Okay. He's starting a business. He works 20 hours a day. And he sleeps at the office. So his wife is getting mad at him because he's never at home. Okay. And just so you know, Dr. Alice, there's one thing I know about Donovan, and not that women can't be this way too. Don't think I'm criticizing women, but one thing about Donovan, because he's a guy, is he work hard work. He appreciates hard work and contributing to his family if he's married, right? Right, Donovan? We as guys take our work very seriously. In fact, we compare getting fired from a job to divorce. So this guy's character trait is his work ethic. His behavior is he's gone 20 hours. Mm-hmm. So which one are you focused on? In fact, I blame the psychology industry with their incessant focus on behaviors for the behaviors. My son's middle name is Hamilton. And he's 17 years old, by the way, so this goes before the play, but I was reading that same Ron Chernow biography that Lin-Manuel Miranda read that led to him creating that play. I was reading that when my son was in the womb. And if you know the story of Alexander Hamilton, he was killed in a duel with Aaron Burr over character. And what you realize, what you read in the book, is that his son also died.
Right.
Defending his father's honor 3 years earlier in 1801. Our founding fathers were men of character. These guys invented democracy. These guys invented democracy. There was Greece and Rome, and they were very limited in their democratic view of things. So these guys invented, and then those are the only footprints that they had to go from. So they were men of character. And we have lost sight of that in our society today. We don't look at character traits, we look at behaviors.
Well, let me just see if I'm tracking and following you and kind of give the recap, and you can kind of fill in any
Okay, sorry
gaps.
about it.
Maybe.
I
know. No, I'm just
forever.
kind of wrapping my brain around the idea. And I think I'm following you in that, like, what I'm hearing is that, when we're in an argument or a fight with our partner, it's really coming out of fear and insecurity, maybe from our past and our relationship with our parents. And so we have to identify that first and be aware and present to that's what's happening. But I guess, like, what I'm curious about, like, okay, then when you identify that, then what do you do? Like, at that point?
Let me explain it this way.
Okay.
Okay, this is one of the things that I've discovered. This is actually what causes divorce. I'm going to explain to you what causes divorce. Okay, just say, for an example, I'm not going to do this, Dr. Alice.
Okay.
Well, let's just say I was to walk over to you right now and I was to smack you in the face. Okay, just think about that. Okay, I walk over, smack you in the face. Think about your response. Exactly, you're looking in your face at everything, right? You're going to do one of two things. You're going to fight or flight, right? You're either going to hit me back or you're going to just, flee. Those are your two options, right? But the point, and then you're disconnecting this call. You'll never take a call from me again. Every time, exactly. She's like, of course. Are you kidding? You just,
That would just
but the point is every time my name comes up in conversation, you're going to think bad about me. Think about it. You see me doing a television interview. Let's just say, see me on television. You're going to look at your friends and go, that guy hit me. He's an a-hole. That guy is an a-hole. And what you're doing is you're building a case against me. The more you interact with me, the bigger this case against me goes, right? Because you've forgotten everything else. The only thing you know about me is I smack you. You don't know anything else about me, right?
Yeah.
So say, I'm going to bring you into this, Donovan. So let's just say you have a friend whose brother moves in town. You don't know the brother, but the brother is Donovan. Okay, this is your friend. This is not anything related with me. Nothing to do with me. Okay, you have a friend of yours, and your friend's brother moves in town, and your friend's brother's Donovan. And when you look at Donovan, for some reason, when you look at Donovan, you see me. His mannerisms, the way he talks, something about Donovan reminds you of me. Okay, what is your reaction when you meet Donovan?
Well, probably a little colder than if I didn't have that association with you. If he had, like,
wait a minute.
I know.
Exactly. You get my point. You get where I'm going.
I get it. It's like the prejudice of, like,
it's called a projection. It's called a projection. What you're doing is you're projecting your anxieties for me towards him. Now imagine I'm your parent, and imagine you fall in love with Donovan. That's the problem. That's the problem right there. Okay, I'm your dad. Okay, and I smacked you because you were mean to me. Okay, you didn't do you didn't clean up your room the other day, by the way. Smack. And I did that when you were 10 years old. Okay, so now you're an adult, you're 35 years old, and you fall in love with Donovan. And you have no clue why you have this anxiety towards him. And when you forgive me for smacking you, you get to look at Donovan for who he is. Until you forgive me for smacking you, you are always going to look at Donovan through your lens of your relationship with me. Everything that Donovan does, you're going to have to filter it through me smacking you before you're able to hear what Donovan has to say. And the only way you can see Donovan with clarity is by forgiving me, which means to cancel, by the way. Okay, if you forgive me, you cancel the anxieties that were created when I smacked you. And so you have no more anxieties towards me at all. That's what forgiveness does. It cancels the anxieties that when you go through the process and you understand what forgiveness is, when you've gone through it, and you've let go of that past, then it opens your mind to the objectivity of today. And until that happens, you're always going to be filtering through the subjectivity of the past. that make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, because what ultimately happens is every instance is called a projection. And when the job is finished, it's called transference.
Mhm.
Divorce happens when you transfer all of your feelings about me onto Donovan. And then that's when the feelings, the bond that was created at the very beginning is fully evaporated. That's a process, and that's a trigger event. That's when you realize you're done with Donovan, you don't love him anymore, and it's time for a divorce. It had nothing to do with Donovan, by the way. It had to do with me. People are blaming the wrong person when they get angry at their partner. If we're here to find blame, which we're not, we're here to solve the problem. And because when you take the whole thought process to forgiveness, that's when the job is finished. That's when the problem has been solved. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I got you both thinking. You guys are quiet. You guys are the host here. You guys are quiet. Wow. That's. I guess I'm doing a good job if I got you both thinking, right?
Yeah, so I think I'm tracking. Let's see if there's any gaps. But it sounds like a lot of what you're saying is sort of first you got to dig into sort of your past, figure out what kind of events you have. A lot of times, maybe all the time, it's going to be with your parents, but events that are getting pushed forward and projected onto your partner.
Right.
And then once you've identified some of those pieces, if you can figure out how to move through, and you probably have some steps for this, but move through sort of a forgiveness process, or in some way sort of lessen the strength of those associations, that's going to open you up to really see the relationship more authentically, as opposed to colored by all those past events.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Okay. And just to elaborate what happens when you forgive, this is the most important thing that I teach. So my parents were strict. My dad's no longer around. He knows I love him. But if you were to call my mom up right now, she has 4 kids, she would tell you she was strict on us kids. So I go to my 20-year high school reunion, and I'm talking to one of my classmates, and I mention about my parents. And he looks at me and he says, "Oh, that's right. You had the strict parents." And that comment shocked me to my core, because what it did was it took me back to when I was in high school. And I realized when I was in high school, I thought about nobody but me. Think about that. Think when you were in high school, nobody else, you didn't think about anybody else. And in fact, it's supposed to be that way. You're developing an identity. Ego is Latin for I. We just think ego is a bad word because it's associated with the power thing. But ego in its most basic term just means I, and it's identity. It's who am I? One of the greatest questions that you're supposed to be asking yourself. And when you're a teenager and you're just starting to come into this mental awareness of who you are, you're supposed to be completely self-centered. But my parents, what I in essence did to summarize that story is I saw the situation from their perspective for the first time. And until you go through this healing process, you cannot see your partner. You can at first because of all the good things, but when you get into that day-to-day existence, okay, you cannot see your partner until you go through this mental healing process of being able to get out of it's only about you. Because remember, what that means is your parents did something to you, whatever, or whatever. And Donovan, you're right. It's not just the parents, but the younger you are, the more impressionable you are. Let's make that a statement. Okay. So obviously the youngest, your parents, but you've had that experience with them, whatever that experience is. Okay. And you cannot see it from their perspective. It's all about you. And when you see it from their perspective for the first time, you learn that skill. That's what I did. If you want to understand a man, you have to walk in his shoes. It comes from To Kill a Mockingbird. You ever read that when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and that line changed my life. That one line changed. I do that every day. Here's the way I describe this. Do you guys get mad at slow drivers?
Probably, yeah. Depends.
I have solved that problem.
Oh, really? What's the solution?
The epiphany that I had was when I realized that the other driver was driving someplace too. When I was able to sit in the seat of the other driver, it changed everything. because I realize that they're human too, right? Think about it. We got a 2,000 pound piece of metal around, I mean, you can get around that metal. We think that's protecting us, the whole road race thing, right?
Right.
But when you realize that there's somebody else in the car in front of you and they're going at a slower speed, in fact, that's the whole point. If you can see it from the other person's perspective, it adds such clarity in whatever you're dealing with. I live that way. Every engagement I'm involved with, my mind is always going to the other side and trying to see the other side's perspective so I can understand it better.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a healthy way to approach it because you don't know what that person is dealing with or their situation.
Exactly.
Maybe
Yeah.
they have a baby in their car, or maybe they are driving a giant truck and they don't want to tip over. So yeah.
That's what I mean. You don't but once you think about it from their
Right.
perspective, that's the point. So you have a baby in your car. Well, I'm not going to get mad at you now. How can you get mad at a slow driver with a baby in the car, right?
Right.
You think not, right?
Yeah, definitely. Great.
But you take that and you put that in your marriage. Think about that from the marriage perspective.
Yeah.
If that's the way that the two are relating to each other in a marriage, it changes everything.
Yeah, definitely. I could see how that can benefit if we can just kind of understand and walk in another person's shoes and get their perspective and understand that better.
Well, what do you think's going on in therapy, traditional therapy? They're going in and saying, I'm going to tell the therapist what my partner isn't hearing, and maybe the therapist will tell him, and then the therapist does the same. This therapists are just the third person in a fight. They're pointing fingers just like the couple are doing. That's what therapy is. That's why they have tissues in a therapist's office, by the way, because they're going to make somebody proud.
All right, Tim. Well, we appreciate you being on our show. Before we wrap up today, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Well, again, if anybody wants to follow me, well, the first thing is email me. It's my name, Tim Kellis at att.net. It's real easy, Tim Kellis at att.net. But what I would highly recommend people to do, my group has almost 25,000 members. It's called the Marriage Support Group on Facebook. I average about 1,000 posts a month. I average about 30,000 comments a month. Damn. So if you go and post, my spouse and I are having troubles, you'll get, I've seen posts that have 100, 200 comments on them. So in fact, you'll get, and I work very hard to remove judgmental people. So it's less and less judgmental comments and more supportive comments. That's what I've been doing behind the scenes in building this group, is to make sure that the dialogue that goes on is supportive. And so it's a great group. I have one of the things that I've done in this group that's unique as well is I have a private DM with 80 other marriage experts in the group. I have allowed, it's not just for me. I don't care who. My vision is to lower the divorce rate. That's where I'm going with this, and I can't do this by myself. So as I'm building this group, I'm building it, allowing anybody that comes in and wants help. Anybody's invited. Everybody can come in. So people will get advice. In the marriage, I kick out licensed therapists that are giving behavior advice because they're actually doing more harm than good. So you also don't have licensed therapists as part of these experts. And these are experts that address marriages mentally. I actually have interviews. I've got about 25 interviews right now. And these interviews, and we go through what each individual expert is focused on. And you'll see that what these guys do work. So it's a great group. And you can also connect with me there too.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put those links in the description below. So if you're interested, check it out. Thank you for being on our show.
I appreciate it. And again, thank you guys very much. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come on your show and chat.
Of course, yes. And thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and spread the happiness in the world. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.